I was just packing my things, going through all the files one last time, as it was almost time to close the police station for the night. It was around 10 p.m. when suddenly a scared woman approached my station. She looked terrified, her body trembling, and with great hesitation she said, "Inspector, I need your help. I am really troubled." Her face was full of fear, and her hands and legs were shaking. I asked her to sit down and calmly inquired about the issue. "Tell me, what's going on? What's such a serious matter that you have come here to the police station at this hour?" I was truly surprised because it was rare for a woman to be out alone so late in the night, especially in our village. Women in that area generally did not venture out of their homes after sunset, and it was almost impossible for any woman to come to a police station without a male companion at that time. I found it quite strange that this woman had come here alone at such an hour. The village where my police station was located was very conservative, and no woman would dare to step out alone at night. So if this woman had come to my station without any male escort, there must have been something really serious behind it. She sat down before me, nervously twisting her fingers. Occasionally, she would adjust her scarf or bite her lips, clearly anxious. I reassured her, saying, "Don't worry, you're in the police station now. You're safe. No one will harm you. Just tell me what's bothering you." She hesitated before responding. "Inspector, it's a matter of our village's honor, and it's difficult for me to speak about it. That's why everyone in the village is staying silent, but I can't keep quiet anymore. I am a widow, and what has happened to my daughter is unbearable. I can't stay silent on this matter. I don't know how to explain it, but there's something going on in the village that no one is talking about." And with that, she broke down into tears. Seeing her cry, I became worried and said, "Sister, if you've come all the way to the police station, it shows you have the courage. Everything will be okay. Don't be afraid. Tell me everything. I will solve your problem. Is there anyone troubling you or your daughter?" At my question, she went silent. Her silence told me that this was something very serious. I knew that the village's local landlord, or chaudhry, was a ruthless man, so I suspected that he might be the cause of the trouble. A few days ago, we had received similar reports about him. However, this woman did not mention the chaudhry at all. Instead, the problem she shared with me left me stunned. I asked her, "How could this be possible?" She replied, "Inspector, that's the problem. What I'm saying is absolutely true. The village girls are getting pregnant, but no one knows how. These are all respectable and modest girls. You know very well how our girls stay home and follow the rules, not stepping out after sunset. My daughter is just like them, a modest and respectful girl. But even she became pregnant at home. I don't know who the father of her child is, but when the villagers find out, they'll stone her to death. In our village, if a girl is found to have committed any wrongdoing, she is either stoned, whipped, or turned into a servant in the chaudhry's house." She continued, her voice quivering. "All the girls who have faced this situation so far have kept it a secret in their homes. But when so many girls are getting pregnant in just 1 month, how long can it stay hidden? Sooner or later, the villagers will find out, and then our daughters will be punished for a sin they never committed. It's just too much for them. They are already scared, their conditions are worsening, and on top of that, they're terrified of what will happen in the future. We've kept this a secret out of fear of the chaudhry, but I can't hide this anymore. We need to do something about it." Her words hit me hard. The terror and helplessness in her voice were evident. The situation was not just about the girls' safety, but also about the future of the entire village. The injustice they were facing was unimaginable, and the fear of being punished for something they didn't do was crushing their spirits. It was clear that they needed help. The question was, how could I help them? How could I protect these girls from the deep-rooted societal pressures and the brutal practices that had been allowed to persist unchecked for so long? I asked her, "Is there any way we can stop this? Do you have any idea who is behind this? Is there someone who can help us?" She shook her head, her face filled with despair. "The chaudhry is too powerful. No one dares to stand up against him. But the girls, they don't deserve this. They don't deserve to be punished for something they didn't even do. I knew that this was a situation that required immediate action. This was no longer just about one woman or one family. It was about the safety and future of the entire village. The women, the daughters, and the children of this village were at risk, and something had to be done before it was too late. As I sat there listening to her story, I made a vow to myself that I would do everything in my power to bring justice to these women, to uncover the truth, and to protect them from the cruel fate that awaited them if nothing was done. The system had failed them so far, but it was time for the police to step in and make a difference. These girls and their families deserved to live in peace, free from the fear of being judged and punished for something they had no control over. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she spoke with an intensity that revealed the gravity of her words. "This man must be punished, or else the dignity of our daughters will be lost, and we won't be able to do anything to stop it," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Who would marry a widow like me with an orphan daughter, especially when my daughter is so pure? I vouch for her chastity, but how will this society ever believe that? How will they consider her innocent?" She paused for a moment, wiping her tears. "And then there's the Chaudhry. You know him well. He's a cruel man, and he has never done a favor for any of us villagers. His cruelty is notorious throughout the region. He has no compassion for us." Her voice quivered as she expressed the depth of her despair. She had shared all her pain with me, and now she looked at me with eyes full of hope, as if she had come to the police station with a deep belief that I could help. I looked at the 45-year-old woman in front of me, feeling the weight of her struggles. She was obviously exhausted by the circumstances, her face filled with helplessness. I put the files aside and told her, "Look, it's already quite late. If I go to the village tonight and start asking questions, the Chaudhry will definitely get wind of it, and then it will be much harder to protect your daughters. Because in this village, the Chaudhry is more powerful than the law itself." I paused to let my words sink in. "But don't worry, I will start the investigation tomorrow. Trust the law. The criminal will be punished." She folded her hands in front of me, her voice trembling as she said, "Inspector, please don't reveal my or my daughter's name. If the Chaudhry finds out I came to the police station at night, he will make our lives a living hell. You know the law here is in his hands, and he is the one who administers justice." I reassured her, "Don't worry, I will conduct the investigation discreetly. I'll find a reason to visit the village, and I'll observe things myself." She thanked me, her face filled with gratitude, and left the station, leaving me to reflect on the events. My home was nearby, a small government-provided room that served as my quarters. It was a humble place, located on the outskirts of the village. My wife and children lived in the city, and I had made no effort to bring them to this remote area, given the harsh conditions and the Chaudhry's influence in the village. I preferred to live alone in this small, isolated space. The village where I worked was under the oppressive rule of the Chaudhry, and no one dared to challenge him. Even though my job as an officer gave me some authority, the power dynamics in this area made it difficult to take any action against him. It was a place where the Chaudhry's word was the law, and everyone else had to comply with it, whether they liked it or not. I was exhausted from the day, though it wasn't because I had been overworked. In fact, there was barely any work to do at the station. Most of my time was spent sitting at my desk, going through old files, with no real cases to investigate. This was the first time in a long while that a case had come to the station. It was rare for anyone from the village to come to the police for help, let alone a woman who had the courage to speak out against the oppressive forces in the community. The woman's words kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about how so many girls from the same village had become pregnant, yet no one knew how it was happening. All of them were supposed to be modest, respectful girls. How could it be that they were all untouched by sin, yet still they were suffering? Who was responsible for this? How could someone enter their homes and violate them without anyone noticing? The thought shook me to my core. Was there no place in this village where a woman was safe, even within the confines of her own home? The questions haunted me, but there were no answers yet. The only thing I knew for certain was that the Chaudhry was involved somehow. But how could I prove it? And even if I did, would anyone have the courage to speak out against him? The police station was quiet now, with only a few staff members left. I had two female constables and one sub-constable, but they had already gone home for the night. I was alone and with no one to discuss the matter with. I found myself more and more consumed by the situation. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong in this village, but I didn't know where to start looking for answers. The woman had trusted me with her story, and I felt a deep responsibility to help her. But I also knew that if I acted recklessly, it could put her and the other girls at greater risk. The Chaudhry was a powerful man, and he wasn't someone who could be easily defeated. I would have to be careful, and I would have to be strategic. I sat in the quiet police station trying to gather my thoughts, knowing that the next day would be crucial. The woman's plea for justice had ignited something in me, and I knew that I couldn't ignore it. This was more than just a case. It was about standing up against the darkness that had taken over this village and trying to bring light to those who had been silenced for far too long. The next morning, when I arrived at the station, refreshed and ready to take action, the three officers were already present. I sat down with the two female constables and explained, "Today we're going to survey the village, listen to the people's problems, and try to resolve their concerns." Upon hearing this, both of the constables looked at me in surprise. One of them said, "What problems could the villagers possibly have? Even if they do, there's not much we can do. Who can stand up to the Chaudhry?" Both of these women were also posted here from the city, just like me, but they had been greatly intimidated by the Chaudhry. I could sense their hesitation, but I decided to take them into confidence. I shared with them everything the woman, Sugra Begum, had told me the night before. The situation she had described was far more serious than we could have imagined, and as I explained it to the constables, they were visibly shocked. One of the constables said, "How is it possible for a girl to get pregnant and not know about it? That's like the sun rising without anyone noticing." I explained, "That's exactly what I'm saying. There's something suspicious going on. This is no ordinary situation. 10 girls have lost their dignity, and now their futures are at risk. Once the Chaudhry learns about their pregnancies, he will punish them. That's how things work in this village. Guilty men are never held accountable, but innocent women are punished." I continued, "The guilty parties will never be caught, but the innocent girls will suffer the consequences. We need to take action, but it must be done quietly, without alerting the Chaudhry or his people. Otherwise, they'll halt our efforts and impose their own laws." The constables, though responsible, were clearly frightened by the situation. One of them said, "Why provoke the Chaudhry? We should just tell him about the matter, and he'll handle it. If we take any action and the Chaudhry becomes our enemy, our jobs could become impossible. Who knows, he might even turn against us, because in this village, the Chaudhry won't tolerate anyone else having any power." I smiled and responded, "Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. How long will we live under the Chaudhry's oppressive rule? How long will our people be forced to live their lives in fear of him? You both are educated women. Don't you think we should empower the women of this village? They should have the strength to stand up for their rights, to at least file an FIR if needed. 10 girls have been affected by this, and not a single one has had the courage to file a report. They are all hiding in their homes, too scared to speak out. Do they not deserve to live with dignity? Don't they deserve to be protected under the law?" The constables finally understood my point. After a moment of reflection, they both promised that they would support me to the very end. With their commitment, I felt more confident. I handed over the station to the sub-constable and set off with the two female constables toward the village. As soon as we entered the village, the Chaudhry's men were already aware of our arrival. They quickly came to us and said, "Come with us, we'll take you to the Chaudhry's mansion." I calmly refused, saying, "No, we're here to meet with the villagers, not to visit the mansion. We're here to see if the people have any issues we can address." Hearing this, the Chaudhry's men were taken aback. They were clearly confused by my refusal, as they had expected us to go straight to the Chaudhry. However, I had no intention of following their plans. My goal was to help the villagers, not to engage with the Chaudhry's inner circle. The Chaudhry's men continued to insist, "The Chaudhry is the one who resolves the problems of the village. Why should you worry? Come with us to the mansion. We'll offer you some tea and refreshments." I firmly replied, "I am here to do my duty, This village falls under my jurisdiction, and it is my responsibility to address any issues the people here are facing. The man, clearly frustrated, said, "Sir, if you interfere with our village affairs, your transfer will be arranged." I responded, "I am not here to intervene in anything. I simply want to meet the villagers, talk to them, and listen to their concerns. What's wrong with that? Why should you or your chaudhry have any objections? Go and tell him that Inspector Azaz Hassan has come to speak with the villagers." With that, I dismissed the chaudhry's men and began talking to the villagers. As expected, most of the villagers praised the chaudhry, but I could see their faces. There was something off about their smiles. I knew their words weren't sincere, but I continued to listen politely. I then signaled to the lady constables to go to a few homes and speak with the women there. I needed to confirm whether what Sugra Begum had said was true. The constables quickly went to work, trying to gather information before the chaudhry's men could intimidate us further. They visited several houses, and just as they were about to visit a few more, the chaudhry himself arrived with his men. He smiled upon seeing me and said, "Sir, you didn't have to go through all this trouble. This is our village, and these are our people. Whatever issues there are, we will handle them ourselves. Why don't you come with us to the mansion? We'll serve you some tea. You don't need to stand here in the sun." I responded firmly, "I've been here for quite some time, but the villagers don't even know who I am. That's why I've come to the village today. But it seems like you have an issue with that." The chaudhry laughed and said, No, I have no problem with you talking to the villagers. Go ahead." I knew what he was implying, but I had no intention of letting him dictate my actions. I said, "I am not a guest. I'm a government employee, and it is my job to stand here in the sun and do what I'm doing. So please, don't worry about it." After a tense exchange, I signaled to the lady constables that we should head back. We returned to the station, and once we were there, the constables shared some unsettling news. The women in the village are terrified. Of the 10 homes we visited, 4 had pregnant girls, but none of them know how it happened. They are scared that if the chaudhry finds out, a panchayat will be convened and a decision will be made against these girls. The chaudhry may even expel them and their families from the village. That's why everyone is trying to keep this a secret. The girls begged us not to tell anyone about their pregnancies. The constables continued, "The men and women of the village are all afraid of the chaudhry, but that doesn't mean that anyone should be allowed to destroy the lives of these girls. No one knows who is doing this, not even the girls themselves. They don't know who is violating them." The gravity of the situation sank in. These girls, trapped in a web of fear, had no voice. They couldn't even identify their abuser, yet their lives were being destroyed. The chaudhry's grip on the village was suffocating, and his control over the villagers was absolute. They were all living in constant fear, unable to speak out about the injustices they were suffering. But this was a turning point. No more would these girls and their families live in silence. Something had to change. The words of the 2 lady constables filled me with concern. This was no small matter. It was a serious issue that should have been reported and investigated through an official FOR. However, none of the women in the village had filed a report. Sugra Begum had only shared the issue with me verbally, and she wasn't even willing to file an FOR herself. She feared that doing so would expose her name and bring great shame upon both her and her daughter. I was at a loss, unsure of how to proceed. The case had not been officially recorded, and there was no formal investigation yet. I discussed the matter with the lady constables, asking for their advice on how we could assist the villagers. I knew that these people, terrified of the chaudhry, would never come to the police station or openly talk to me about their issues. One of the constables suggested, "This can only happen if a woman comes forward to file a report and speaks about the abuse she suffered. But the women of this village won't do that. We need a woman who will be brave enough to talk about it and file an official report." After a moment of thought, she proposed an idea. "Why don't we send an undercover woman to live in one of the homes in the village? She can keep an eye on things, gather information, and help us expose the culprit. It's the only way we'll be able to get the truth." Her suggestion made sense, but the challenge was how to integrate such a woman into the village without alerting the chaudhry's men. The chaudhry had eyes and ears everywhere, and he knew every little detail about the village. The constable then added, Since Sugra Begum has already shown so much courage, maybe she will allow this woman to stay at her home. If she says that the woman is a relative, it will make things much easier for us. This suggestion appealed to me, so I immediately followed through. I contacted one of our lady constables from the city, a young, slender, and attractive woman who had recently joined the force and was on leave. I arranged for her to come to the village, not through official channels, but as a personal request to avoid involving our higher-ups. The Chaudhry's influence was so vast that we couldn't afford to involve anyone from our department. We had to gather evidence discreetly. The young constable arrived promptly when summoned, and upon learning about the situation, she was eager to help. "This is a cunning criminal who has taken advantage of these 10 girls without anyone knowing. I will definitely assist you in catching him," she said enthusiastically. I then sent a message to Sugra Begum through a local child, telling her that I wanted to meet with her. At exactly 10 p.m., she quietly arrived at the police station. I introduced her to the young constable, Naima, and told Sugra, "Consider her a distant relative from the city, staying with you for a few days. She will keep an eye on things, gather information, and help us uncover the real culprit. We will file the FIR through Naima's name, which will protect your identity, and with Naima staying in your house, the culprit will be exposed." Sugra Begum quickly understood the plan and agreed without hesitation. "I have some distant relatives. I can introduce her as my niece who has come to the village to see the fair," she said. "The village fair is coming soon, so no one will suspect anything. This way, no one will question her presence, and your work will get done." With her approval, we sent Naima to stay with Sugra Begum, confident that our plan was moving forward. Naima had a mobile phone through which she kept in touch with us. She was incredibly clever, and within just 4 days, she had figured out the entire situation. When she reported back, we were left shocked. What we had believed to be serious was, in fact, much worse. Getting involved in this matter felt like putting our hand in the mouth of a crocodile. After a week, Naima delivered the full details. Following my instructions, she had gone to Sugra Begum's house and introduced herself as their distant niece. The villagers, who were very kind-hearted, quickly accepted Naima as one of their own. She blended in effortlessly and began keeping a close watch on everyone. Naima wasn't just any woman, she was a trained police officer, and it didn't take her long to figure out who was suspicious. Naima soon discovered that the local milkman's behavior was questionable, and what shocked us even more was that the girls who had consumed milk from him were the same girls who had been involved in the incidents. The milkman wasn't originally from the village. He had moved here from another area and opened a dairy shop. Most villagers had their own livestock and rarely bought milk, but he started selling milk at a very low price, which attracted those who didn't have cows or buffaloes. However, every family that bought milk from him became victims of this crime. Naima, using her skills, collected a nail from the milkman and handed it over to us for DNA testing. We also launched a measles vaccination campaign in the village, during which we managed to arrange for DNA tests for 10 girls. When the DNA results came back, it turned out that the person who had abused these girls was indeed the same, but it wasn't the milkman. This revelation completely flipped the case. Until then, Naima and we had been certain that the milkman was the culprit. However, the DNA report told a different story. Naima, being cautious, had also taken samples from the milkman. After analyzing them, we discovered that the milk he sold was laced with a sedative. Anyone who drank it would fall unconscious. The milkman was giving out so much free milk that entire families would drink it, and with no refrigeration in the village, they would consume it all before falling unconscious. This was when the perpetrator would take advantage of the situation. But if the milkman wasn't the criminal, then who was? To get closer to the truth, we knew we had to confront the milkman. One afternoon, as the milkman was leaving the village and heading towards the city, I intercepted him on the road. I took him straight to the police station and locked him in a dark room. After intimidating him with questions, he finally confessed to everything. He started saying, "I'm just an ordinary poor man. I had a small milk shop in another village, but it wasn't doing well because everyone here has their own livestock. I didn't have much to do, and I was really struggling. Then one day, the Chaudhry of this village told me to open a milk shop here. He also gave me a medicine that would thicken the milk." He continued, "After hearing the Chaudhry's advice, I started mixing the medicine into the milk. Following his orders, I gave everyone more milk than they needed. The Chaudhry and his men told the villagers to drink the milk every day so they could work in the fields with full energy. That's why everyone in the village started drinking the milk regularly. The practice of drinking buttermilk and milk was common in the village anyway, but I didn't know what kind of medicine he gave me. I never knew what it really was or why he wanted me to do this. I explained to the milkman that it was a sedative, and he was stunned. He started pleading, apologizing, and even began crying. I told him, "I'll let you go, but only if you agree to become an eyewitness and testify." Then I had Naima file the FIR, and we brought the whole issue to light in front of the villagers. I exposed the Chaudhry for his crimes. Upon hearing this, the Chaudhry's men came after me, intending to harm me, but I had already called for backup from the city. I had informed an honest senior officer who came to the village to arrest the Chaudhry himself. We took the Chaudhry into custody and brought him to the city. The case went to court, and the milkman testified against him. DNA samples from the village girls and the Chaudhry matched, proving that he was the man behind these heinous acts. He was the one exploiting the innocent girls of the village. As punishment, the law took its course, and the Chaudhry was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The village was finally free from his tyranny. His son took over the family's position, but he was an educated, well-mannered young man who understood the villagers' problems. He started new development projects in the village, bringing progress and improvement. The people who had lived under the Chaudhry's rule for so long now had a glimmer of hope. But the first person to speak out against the oppression was Sugra Begum. She had the courage to raise her voice when no one else dared. Today, the villagers still applaud her for her bravery, and she is remembered as the woman who stood up for justice in the village.